Welcome to the Week 11 lecture. This will be on the various reform efforts from the Antebellum era. During the Antebellum era, America witnessed significant reforms in schools, prisons, and asylums aimed at improving conditions and addressing systemic inequalities. Reformers sought to make education accessible to all, establish humane and effective correctional practices, and improve the treatment of the mentally ill. Their efforts were driven by the belief in the potential for individual and societal improvement, reflecting a broader shift toward greater social responsibility. Common schools were central to educational reform, as reformers aimed to create publicly funded schools that provided basic education to all children, regardless of their family's economic status. Horace Mann, one of the most influential reformers, advocated for a standard curriculum and the establishment of compulsory education laws. Mann emphasized the importance of education as a way to promote an informed and productive citizenry, which he saw as vital for a successful democracy. His advocacy led to the professionalization of teaching and set the foundation for public school systems in the United States. To improve the quality of teaching, normal schools or teacher training institutions emerged to address the need for professionally trained teachers. These schools were designed to prepare teachers specifically for public or common schools. In 1839, the first normal school was established in Lexington, Massachusetts, creating a standardized approach to teacher education that emphasized instructional skills and pedagogy. The rise of normal schools helped to establish teaching as a recognized profession, improving the quality of education and making it more widely accessible. Reform also extended to the penal system. The Auburn system, developed at Auburn State Prison in New York, represented a shift in prison philosophy. It emphasized discipline, labor, and rehabilitation, moving away from the solitary confinement model used in the Pennsylvania system. Inmates worked together during the day under strict supervision, but slept in individual cells at night. The Auburn system's goal was to rehabilitate inmates through structured work, moral education, and personal discipline, which reformers believed would help reduce recidivism. In the realm of prison and asylum reform, Dorothea Dix played a pioneering role. Dix was deeply concerned with the harsh treatment faced by the mentally ill and those in prisons and almshouses. She documented the neglect and abuse these populations suffered and lobbied for more humane conditions and specialized facilities. Her efforts led to the construction of state-funded mental asylums that prioritized treatment over punishment, moving mentally ill individuals out of jails and into facilities where they could receive proper care. In addition to advocating for improved conditions for prisoners, she also emphasized the need for separate facilities for juveniles and the importance of rehabilitation over mere confinement. The reforms in asylums driven by Dix's advocacy were particularly impactful. Asylums that previously operated with minimal oversight and often horrific conditions began to shift toward a model that emphasized care and treatment. Dix's work contributed to a greater societal understanding of mental illness and the need for specialized institutions. These newly constructed state asylums provided better conditions, resources, and ultimately hope for the mentally ill. Collectively, these reforms in schools, prisons, and asylums during the antebellum period reflected broader societal changes. They marked a growing awareness of the state's role in providing for the public good and improving conditions for marginalized populations. These initiatives set the stage for continued reforms in the post-Civil War era and laid the foundation for the evolution of American education, the criminal justice system, and mental health care. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, the United States experienced high levels of alcohol consumption. Alcohol was deeply woven into daily life, with people of all backgrounds, including men, women, and children, consuming alcoholic beverages regularly. Whiskey in particular was popular, partly because it was easy to distill, and the nation had an abundance of grain. This widespread consumption, however, raised growing concerns among reformers who feared its impact on society. The American Temperance Society, founded in 1826, was at the forefront of the temperance movement, which sought to curb alcohol consumption and, in some cases, promote complete abstinence. Among its most influential leaders was Lyman Beecher, a prominent Presbyterian minister who strongly opposed alcohol. Beecher was known for his powerful sermons, most notably his 6 sermons on the nature, occasion, signs, evils, and remedy of intemperance, which outlined the social and moral harms of alcohol. His sermons resonated with many Americans, helping to galvanize support for temperance by framing intemperance as a moral and societal failing. Another influential group in the movement was the Washington Temperance Society, founded in Baltimore in 1840. This society was unique because it was started by former alcoholics who had experienced dramatic positive changes through sobriety. Members often shared personal stories of overcoming addiction, and these testimonials were compelling in persuading others to abstain from alcohol. Named in honor of George Washington, a symbol of moral integrity, the society linked temperance with patriotism and civic virtue, casting sobriety as a noble choice aligned with American values. As the temperance movement gained momentum, it also shaped the political landscape. Numerous temperance societies formed, and by the 1850s, some states began passing Maine laws, which restricted or outright prohibited the manufacture and sale of alcohol, except for medicinal or sacramental uses. These laws marked an early form of prohibition and reflected the movement's deep impact on American society and governance. Temperance advocates aimed to influence public policy, making temperance a prominent issue in political debates of the time. Ultimately, the temperance movement of the 1820s to the 1840s laid essential groundwork for future prohibition efforts, establishing temperance as a prominent social and political issue. These early reformers set the stage for the national prohibition movement, which culminated in the 18th Amendment in 1919. This amendment, ratified after nearly a century of temperance advocacy, prohibited the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol, and launched the Prohibition era from 1920 to 1933. The temperance movement's legacy is evident in this later wave of legislative action and in the long-term impact of its moral and social ideals on American culture. Before the 1830s, the approach to ending slavery in the United States focused largely on gradual emancipation and colonization. Advocates for gradual emancipation envisioned a slow process of freeing enslaved individuals, often coupled with resettlement initiatives. The American Colonization Society, founded in 1817, epitomized this perspective. The ACS aimed to gradually end slavery by assisting freed African Americans in relocating to Africa, where they established the colony of Liberia as a settlement for those repatriated. While this approach to colonization was intended to address the issue of slavery, it reflected a paternalistic view of African Americans, suggesting that they would be better suited to live in Africa than to remain in the United States as equal citizens. In the 1830s, however, the abolitionist movement underwent a dramatic shift, moving from gradualism to a stance advocating immediate emancipation. Abolitionists of this period began to demand the immediate and uncompensated freedom of all enslaved people, abandoning the slow and measured approach of earlier reformers. William Lloyd Garrison emerged as a leading voice for this new vision. In 1831, he began publishing The Liberator, a radical abolitionist newspaper that boldly called for the complete and immediate end of slavery. Garrison's inaugural issue included his famous declaration, "I will not equivocate, I will not excuse, I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard," reflecting the uncompromising moral urgency of the new abolitionist stance. This growing abolitionist momentum gave rise to numerous anti-slavery societies, most notably the American Anti-Slavery Society, founded in 1833. These societies organized grassroots efforts to spread awareness about the horrors of slavery and mobilized public opinion through literature, pamphlets, and public meetings. Prominent abolitionists like Frederick Douglass and Angelina and Sarah Grimke became influential figures, using their voices and writings to reveal the cruelty of slavery and advocate for racial equality. The abolitionist movement's reach expanded further with the publication of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852. This powerful novel exposed the brutality of slavery in vivid detail, humanizing the suffering of enslaved people and portraying the institution's moral depravity. The book's massive popularity made it instrumental in galvanizing Northern sentiment against slavery and sparking opposition to the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which required citizens to assist in capturing runaway slaves. The abolitionist movement's transformation from a gradual and colonization-centered approach to a demand for immediate emancipation marked a significant ideological shift. By adopting a stance that was more confrontational, more uncompromising, and rooted in moral principles of human rights, abolitionists influenced the political and social climate that eventually led to the Civil War. This intensification of the movement ultimately contributed to the abolition of slavery with the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865. The shift represented a pivotal moment in American history, one that helped reshape the nation's understanding of freedom, equality, and justice. The New York Magdalene Society, founded in 1830, was a moral reform organization with a mission to rescue and rehabilitate women involved in prostitution, aiming to guide them toward respectable lives. The organization, along with similar societies, provided an opportunity for women to participate actively in social reform activities, offering them a chance to engage in philanthropic work focused on improving society. These societies, often run by women, allowed them to build leadership and organizational skills, helping them to move into more prominent roles in public life, a space from which they had traditionally been excluded. Sarah and Angelina Grimke, daughters of a prominent slaveholding family in South Carolina, were among the first women to connect the fight for abolition with the fight for women's rights. Active in the 1830s and 1840s, the Grimke sisters were outspoken abolitionists who drew parallels between the oppression of slaves and the limitations imposed on women by a patriarchal society. Their writings and speeches emphasized that both groups suffered under systems of control that denied their basic humanity. Through their activism, they highlighted how social justice issues were interconnected, advocating not only for the end of slavery, but also for gender equality. Their advocacy became an early bridge between the abolitionist movement and the burgeoning women's rights movement. Elizabeth Cady Stanton emerged as a leading figure in the women's rights movement, deeply influenced by her involvement in the anti-slavery cause and her friendships with prominent abolitionists such as Lucretia Mott and Susan B. Anthony. Stanton and Mott, who met through their abolitionist work, organized the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York. This convention is often recognized as the formal beginning of the American women's rights movement. At the convention, the attendees drafted the Declaration of Sentiments, modeled after the U.S. Declaration of Independence. This document boldly demanded women's suffrage and equal rights under the law, listing grievances against the way society and law had systematically denied women their rights. The connection between moral reform and women's rights became increasingly apparent as women who participated in moral reform activities began to see the parallels between their desire for social improvement and their own limited rights and opportunities. The moral reform movement provided a space for women to network, organize, and develop their political skills. Through their involvement, many women gained a sense of empowerment and the confidence to challenge the societal and legal restrictions they faced. This sense of agency laid the groundwork for the women's rights movement, leading to organized efforts to secure voting rights and legal equality. Over time, the movement for women's rights grew into a powerful force, setting the stage for the later suffrage and equality campaigns that would shape the future of American society.